What's happening, everyone? You're tuned into the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Pat, and today's guest on the show is Dennis Crowley. Dennis is the co-founder and former CEO of Foursquare, a technology company he founded in 2008 that rose to prominence with the launch of its namesake local search and discovery mobile app, which popularized the concept of real-time location sharing and checking in. What started off as his thesis in his grad school program eventually became a company growing at 1 million users per month. Prior to Foursquare, he founded another company called Dodgeball, which was acquired by Google in 2005. We spoke to Dennis all about his upbringing and being a tinkerer from a young age, what led him on a path to entrepreneurship, how he felt after Google acquired his first company, some of the challenges he's gone through while building a successful career in tech, the advice he got from Mark Zuckerberg, what he's up to now, and much, much more. We started off by hearing about what Dennis was like as a kid.
I don't know. I was like not super nerd, but not super jock, right? Like I didn't really play. Like if you go back even to like elementary school and stuff, like I played baseball, but I wasn't talented. I played soccer, but I wasn't skilled. You know, I was really into video games. I was really into Legos. I was really into like tinkering with stuff. Like I got a typewriter and I wanted to make like newspapers and newsletters for school and stuff like that. I got two little kids now and it's cool because like I see them kind of tinkering with stuff in the same way. Maybe that's just what little kids do, but I feel like I can kind of play a role in directing them towards like this stuff that I used to do when I was little, like lots of Legos, lots of like little entrepreneurial projects and stuff. It's super fun.
I feel like that's a perfect place to be, not super nerd, not super jock, just sort of in the middle there where you can kind of hang with the nerds and hang with the jocks. And I guess just like, I don't know, it sounds like you're fitting in, but it's kind of like, you're kind of on your own. You have your own like way of going about things. But I mean, in terms of like being a tinker, I mean, was that something that was just sort of like just came naturally to you? Or was there someone in your life, like maybe your parents, that kind of just put those things in front of you because you showed, some sort of knack for it?
Yeah, well, my dad brought home a computer like real early on. Like I had when other kids had the Atari 2600, I had the Atari like 500, or I think it was I had a keyboard, right? So you could like type things in, and you couldn't really save anything, but you could type. And so, I was playing games and kind of doing that. And then he brought back like an old DOS computer from work. And, like I was taking it apart and trying to expand it and find out what's on the inside. And when I was curious about that stuff, my dad would bring like, oh, here's a guy from work that knows how to put a CD-ROM drive in. Do you want to like learn how to do it? Right. So those opportunities were kind of presented just through that as like a hobby thing. And, then I started combining like, oh, I liked publishing. Like I had my little like newspaper that I would do on the typewriter, and then kind of fell into this world of desktop publishing, like through like it's not even desktop publishing, but it's like doing layout and stuff. And I had access to things like AOL and Prodigy really early online services that got me like connected to the kind of like a weird corner of the internet. And I just had kind of a space to play with this stuff.
Dennis, I know you grew up in Massachusetts and you were born there as well.
Yep.
Have your parents always been, from there? Did they immigrate from another country? Give us a little bit about your family background and what were your parents like?
Yeah, my dad's from South Boston, and my mom is from Hyde Park, which is Hyde Park in Boston, like another kind of direct suburb of Boston. And they were both born in the U.S., but as were my grandparents, but one generation before that, people immigrated over. My dad's side from Ireland, on my mom's side from Poland, and there's like a small bit of like Irish heritage, I guess, but my mom's family takes the Polish stuff pretty seriously, which is great. And my dad was an entrepreneur. My dad owned his own business, so like I would go. It was an electrical contracting company. Like they built communication systems for like subways and things like that. And my dad is not a super technical guy. He's a sales guy. He's a really, really good, outgoing, like salesperson, business guy. And, I would go to the office with him, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, my dad is like the boss, and he has these like two other co-founders, two other bosses. Right. And so I had kind of seen that from an early age, which is certainly like, shaped the way that I think about work as a kid. It wasn't, oh, you go in, you punch in, and your boss is really mean to you. It's like, oh, my dad is the boss, and I see how he treats people, and I see what the office is like. And, that was certainly, played a role in my understanding of this stuff.
Would you say from that age, like you had a pretty clear cut vision that one day you wanted to be like your dad, like have your own company, be an entrepreneur, be your own person? Or was it just something that you were exposed to, but like you weren't necessarily sure that it was the right life for you based on what you saw?
Yeah, I don't think I really understood the entrepreneurial thing until like college, and maybe after college. I remember like having some angst about like, hey, is it my responsibility to take over the family business? Even it's not a family business, you're the business partners, but just like from
Right.
seeing movies and stuff, I was like, maybe that's just what you do. And I knew I didn't want to do that. And there was never any pressure to do anything like that. Of course, I just had that in my head on my own. But like, I think this is jumping ahead a little bit. Me and my co-founder from my first company, Dodgeball, this guy Alex and I, we were best friends in grad school at NYU, and we had a moment right near graduation where it was an epiphany. Like, wait, maybe we're not supposed to get jobs. Maybe we make our own jobs. And I didn't really have that kind of epiphany until like I was 25, 26. And, would I have had that without having this experience and without having, grown up at I don't think I recognized my dad as an entrepreneur until around that time. I was just like, oh, he's just like the boss, and I think the boss is different than like you started the thing, like you had this idea and you worked on it for many, many years. And it's only in hindsight that I really have like a real appreciation for that stuff.
Kind of going back, like you talk about sort of your affinity for like computers and just like, gadgets and things like that. Was that something that you sort of saw like people around you, like friends were also kind of playing around with those things, or was it again, like kind of more unique to your situation, like your dad being able to bring these things home and actually give you that sort of early exposure to, these like new like technologies and whatnot?
Yeah, one of my best friends growing up had a computer at home too, and we kind of equally nerded out over it. And there's kind of this weird Venn diagram of like I was a real like Nintendo nerd. Like I just played a lot of Nintendo. I played a lot of Zelda. I played a lot of Super Mario and Metroid and all these other things. And like that I was a kid that was on the floor like drawing maps and bookmarking stuff. Like we really nerded out over that. And there's like a Venn diagram of that, and I think people that found themselves in computers as well. And I wasn't doing computers for games. I wasn't playing games on computers. I was just like kind of pushing at what you could do with it, and communicating with people online and trying to get machines to talk to each other and stuff. And those two things aren't like they're not directly related, but to me, when I look back in hindsight, like, yeah, I had all this experience, like, building and playing with Nintendo, which is basically a computer, and then fiddling with the constraints and the boundaries of like a real computer, which was, DOS. And I mean, I'm talking like DOS, like it's this big thing, but at the time it was like a complicated thing to try to navigate, in early days of like the text-based internet. And I think there's some correlation between having those two experiences in parallel.
At what point did you realize that, I want to do something that is different from my parents, that's different than from what everybody else wants to do, and that you felt comfortable in that decision? Not only that you knew that you wanted to do it, but that it felt comfortable to you that I'm okay pursuing something that is different than what others are around me are pursuing, or what my parents maybe thought I would pursue.
Yeah, that's a great question. My parents were always like super supportive of whatever I wanted to do. Like I I went to college at Syracuse in upstate New York, and I was like a communications major. And my dad's like, well, what do you do with that? What's your job? I'm like, hey, maybe you
I
work in a
communicate.
magazine.
What do you think I do?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, well, he's always like, what's going to be your
Right.
job after? Well, never any
Yeah.
pressure or anything, right?
Right.
And then, I moved down to New York City, and I worked. I had internships at like at an advertising agency, and I was like, I like this, but I don't love it. And then worked at like an internet company as my first job, and then I worked at a startup that was building products for Palm Pilots. And I kind of got bit by the product bug. Like, wait, you can spend your day making a piece of software, then leave work, go out to a bar, and people are using the software while they're at the bar on their Palm. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, this is it, and I want to make the things that people use. And then I eventually got laid off from that job because of the .com heydays. And then I just left the city, and I moved up to New Hampshire. I was a snowboard instructor I took my .com severance check, and I was a snowboard instructor for 8 months. My parents were never like, what are you doing? You're never gonna rebound. They're like, you'll figure it out. They were just kind of like really cool about it. And
Talk to us about
like
that.
yeah, well, I was saying
Sorry.
my mom had like this kind of this classic advice of like, just do the things that you like doing, and eventually stuff just works out.
Would you say like at that time, you get laid off, you become a snowboard instructor, like were you happy? Like did you feel like you were sort of on the right path, or was it some sort of like quarter life crisis where you're like, I'm just going to do this thing that I feel like I want to do right now, and I have no idea what's coming next, and we'll just take it day by day?
Oh no, I was miserable and terrified and ashamed when I got laid off, right? Because I was like, here I am, like I'm supposed to be a pretty smart dude. Like I've built some stuff, and I have this job at this cool company, and then I got laid off, so I didn't have a job, and we actually got evicted from our apartment because I had a roommate who wasn't paying his rent, and then I broke up with my girlfriend around the time, and then I was just like in the city, not doing too much. Actually, that summer was the first we built the prototype of Dodgeball. Right here's a tool that helps you connect with all of your friends that also don't have jobs. Like that is the version 1 of all the stuff I've ever worked on. And then 9/11 happened a couple months later, and just like and after that, I was like, I'm just out of here. Like I don't know what I'm gonna do, and I was really kind of depressed for a while. And I went to New Hampshire. I was like, I'm just going to do this. This is just kind of a nice break. I just needed a reset after the 9/11 stuff and being in New York for a while. And then I came back to New York after that, and I was pretty energized. And I decided to go to grad school at NYU, and that introduced me to a whole different set of people that I didn't have access to before. And those were I went to art school, right? And I had a really I really kind of labored over this because like I love that program. I got introduced to that program at NYU, and I'm like, am I supposed to go to art school? But I'm like, I'm a business guy, like I went to college for communications and stuff. Like I'm not an artist. But then I kind of let myself go on that journey to art school, and I met all these people I would have otherwise never met, including a bunch of other like people that grew up playing video games and messing with computers and worked at like business jobs and didn't really love it, and they were really creative, and they were trying to figure out what to do, and they ended up in the same program, right? Alex, my co-founder from Dodgeball, like I met him like day 1 of NYU, and I was like, I don't know if I belong here, and he's like, I don't know if I belong here either, and I was like, why don't we stick together and see what comes out of it? You fast forward 2 years, and like we sell our grad school thesis project to Google, which is a cool story, right? But like there's a ton of uncertainty, and like, am I doing the right thing? Should I be in this program? Should I drop out of this program? Or, that goes along with it, that like this stuff only makes sense, and I only have confidence in telling the story, like in hindsight,
Right. And Dennis, before we get to that grad school project, what you just said resonates with a lot of people in this exact moment, right? We've gone through, and still a lot of people are going through this global pandemic, that was truly, just it came out of nowhere. I'm not comparing it to 9/11 whatsoever, but in their own ways had a lot of similar effects. A lot of uncertainty, happened as a result of both of those events. What's going to happen? One, of course, was a security and safety issue. One was a health and safety issue, and what's going to happen, jobs, offices,
Yeah.
etc. Right? A lot of people got laid off. A lot of people lost their jobs. And then on the flip side, I know a lot of people, and we all know a lot of people that took this time as more of a soul searching period and said, "Shit, life's so short. I could get hit with a virus and die. You know, should I be, building products at Amazon and, being a warehouse operations person for the next 20, 30 years of my life?" Answer was no for them. So they're like, screw it. We're just going to sit back and do whatever we're going to do. What is your advice to those people that either lost their jobs or are still soul searching, are still trying to figure out what the next step is? I know depression is a part of that. I know anxiety is a part of that. I know all these thoughts and ideas that you have in your head are a part of that. But from somebody that experienced that and obviously bounced back in a huge way, what do you say to those people?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just moments in life where you find like these reset moments, these moments that kind of bring perspective. And sometimes people go through those individually, like someone in your, like a close friend passes away, or you as an individual get laid off from your job or whatever. And then I think what happened is, like, we kind of collectively, like everyone in the world just went through this thing with this global pandemic, and it makes people just think about the world differently. And like, hey, that's a great thing. Like, it's very challenging. There's a lot of people that are struggling to figure out how to get through this from like I lost my job, a financial point of view, like just kind of their own personal, mental wellness and sanity just from being isolated for so long. But like the I guess the thing to keep in mind is, like, a lot of the most interesting stuff comes at the tail end of pretty crappy periods, right? So, I think a lot of the work that we were, that I was fortunate to find myself in that really interesting grad program at NYU at the rebounding days of New York, trying to come back from 9/11, right? After the tragedy, like, you come back to the city like a year later and you're trying to rebuild, if you think about, like, when, the recession of like 2007, 2008, and companies starting to come out of that period, right? Like Facebook's growth and Twitter's growth and the birth of this next version of the New York tech ecosystem, the beginning of Foursquare and stuff like that. That wasn't a super rosy period. That was like well, I don't have a job doing something else, I'm going to do my own thing, right? And I think when people kind of have that attitude of like, I would rather just work on my own stuff, I'd rather invest in myself and my own time than have this job that I don't love, I think that's when magical things start to happen. But it's also worth saying that, like, those things don't happen unless people have like a way of supporting themselves. Like, they save some money, like they're in a relationship that's stable, that allows someone to take those risks. And this has been a long, kind of pretty crappy period with this pandemic, and people may not have those same type of resources now. So it's the same, but it's different.
Yeah, and it's interesting to look at it from obviously like a macro perspective of like what's going on in just society and in the world, but also from a micro perspective, like an individual standpoint. Whether or not the rest of the world is dealing with the same issues or not. I mean, there are people who have like low points or at a low point in their life, like you were after you had gotten laid off and you weren't kind of sure what was happening. But you kind of talk about having sort of the idea for Dodgeball at the time because you were seeing the opportunity, or like, I guess, the pain that you were personally dealing with, and perhaps an opportunity to create something out of that. What was your mindset at the time when it came to, like, were you actively looking for a business opportunity, or were you actively looking for some sort of pain point to go out and solve, or did it just sort of come to you like almost serendipitously?
Yeah, it was the latter, right? Like, people, I get asked this question a lot from like people in business schools specifically, right? Where they go through like the process of like idea generation and product market fit and stuff. And we never put 100 ideas on a whiteboard and said, this is the one. It was more like, I'm just kind of bored. I'm pretty frustrated that I didn't get to meet up with my buddy yesterday. Let me just write a piece of software that the three of us will use so we don't have a misconnection like that. And this is like a classic, build build the product to scratch your own itch type of thing. It's like when you build something that you want to use, there's a good chance like your direct friends want to use it, and there's a good chance that like their friends want to use it too. And that's what product market fit is. I made something that I wanted, I gave it to you, you wanted it, and a whole bunch of other people wanted it. That's product market fit. And so that's we just kind of stumbled into it. Early Dodgeball was like, I was reading that Harry Potter's book number 3, I think. And I got to the point about the Marauders map, and Harry Potter as a map, and the people walking through Hogwarts. And I'm like, gosh, I need this map for New York. Like, how are we going to, let's make one of these. Like, oh, how do you make it if you don't have magic? Like, I don't know, just use text messaging. It's pretty shitty, but I bet it will work. And you just build the smallest, scrappiest, crappiest version you can think of, and then you build from there,
Yeah, and I love this theme of maps. Like, you sort of talk about playing Zelda and just like being like interested in like maps and video games, and then the Marauders map in Harry Potter, which is obviously an incredible piece of product that Harry has to navigate his way through the halls. But I guess in terms of like, talk to us about, you have this idea, you meet your co-founder Alex in grad school. And then from what I understand, after you guys launched it, it was like only a couple years until Google came and acquired you guys. How did those 2 years sort of unfold? Like, how did you even begin to, I guess, be like, this is going to be a business. We're going to create a business, and we have to build the software. We have to go get users. Because 2 years is, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, is really not that long to build a, I guess, quote unquote successful business. And we'll talk about this because I know you have your feelings about whether or not that was a successful turnout for the business. But as before we do, tell us about those early days.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't really 2 years. It was, my grad program was 2 years long. Alex and I met in the beginning, and we didn't really start seriously working on the Dodgeball stuff until, like our second year there. And then it wasn't, we had to write a thesis, and it's like, oh, let's just do Dodgeball for our thesis. The thesis was, an exploration of the intersection of location-based services, mobile devices, and social software, right? With all these things were new at the time. And, Dodgeball was an expression of those ideas, of that thesis. Like, oh, if you put these 3 things together, cool stuff happens. Like, what's the cool stuff? I don't know. Let's build a prototype and figure it out. And then, because we were in academia, right? We were in grad school. Like, we would go out and you'd speak at these things at an event, like the New York Tech Meetup, or, NYU would put on these conferences, or you would speak on behalf of NYU as a graduate of the program or something. And we were getting kind of exposure and notoriety from making this thing that was rather interesting. And that's how we got connected with Google. Like, it wasn't a fantastic business. I mean, I don't think Dodgeball ever made actually we did. We ran one advertising campaign and we made a couple $1,000. But, we were like the tiniest acqui-hire and probably in the history of Google. It was the 2 of us, and they just bought us, and we went and we said, hey, we'll work here and we'll try to make cool stuff while we're at Google. And, it was really early days for Google too. Like, they had just gone IPO a couple months before we had gotten there. And so it was a really interesting place. It was a whole bunch of people, working on a whole bunch of different stuff. And, it was just kind of the Wild West trying to fit in.
What was one positive and one negative takeaway from your time at Google?
The easy positive is that, remember I was telling, like, we went to grad school. We just, the best part was that I never had exposure to those people. Like, these are artists. Like, I don't know any artists. Now I'm in a program with 100 super talented artists that work at the intersection of like emerging technology and like crazy, interpretive art, experimental art. And so when we went to Google, I was like, I don't really know any engineers. And I was like, these are the world's best engineers. This is like the hardest job to get in the world. Look at all these people I get to meet here and sit and have lunch with them every single day. And so, when we started Foursquare, the first like 30 people we hired were all of the people that we worked with at Google, just like basically our lunch table. It took us like a year and a half to just reproduce our lunch table at Google and do it inside of Foursquare HQ. So that was the best thing, just exposure to like these brilliant people that have gone through all of this Google training. It's just, that's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And the hard part was that, like, because Google was so Wild West at the time, it was just so hard for us to navigate it. And like, we were 2 kids, like kind of, plucked out of this art program at NYU with this mandate to do big stuff. And we just didn't know how to do it. We didn't know how to to work inside of a big company, especially one that was like, in the New York office, which was a satellite of the mothership, and remote managers and crazy hierarchy. It was just like it was challenging, and it took us. We didn't really know how to navigate that.
I think it was, if I read correctly, it was like a couple years later where I think you were at a bar and you found out that Google was gonna shut down Dodgeball and the entire project. What happened? Like, what was what was your reaction? What did you end up doing after that?
Well, we had already left. We'd already left Google at that point, and Google's like, "Hey, we'll keep this on. There's people still using it." I was like, "Okay, that's fine." And then it was at my buddy's birthday party where the news kind of spread that they were going to turn it off, and we just we said the same thing we had said to our friends before. It's like, if Google ever turns it off, we'll make another one. Like, this is we made this for you to begin with, and then Google bought it, and so it's like, if they take it away from us, we'll go make another one. And when we made another one, it wasn't meant to be a company. Foursquare wasn't meant to be this big thing that I'd work on for 12 years and employ like 400 people. It was, hey, Dodgeball is going to get turned off, on March 1st. Like, let's get to work and let's make another one. But look at all this cool stuff that we learned along the way. Like, look at all the interesting ideas that we had about game mechanics, like ripped right from video games, right? Data-powered city guides, which was something we had learned while we were at Google, right? And had exposure to, the massive kind of data infrastructure that was there. And then, one of the core theses of Foursquare, continuing from our work at Dodgeball and NYU, was like, let's make software that makes cities easier to use, that makes the world feel like easier for people to grasp. Like, it makes it easier to find people, easier to find places, easier to find things. That was just like that still is like, that's like the operating system of my heart, right? And my brain. That's the stuff that I like to build. And, we just had another shot to do it, and we just got to work.
Yeah, clearly this was something that for a long time, like, you were super interested in and perhaps passionate about, and saw like this use case and future for it. Did Google just not see that, or they didn't see it the way you saw it? Like, obviously you thought that this was something that should be, I guess, bigger than what it was, but like, was there like some sort of disconnect there?
No, I think there's people at Google that definitely got it. There's tons of social products. There's lots of location products. Google Maps was a big team at that time. It's just like you're like, we were like a little needle inside of a big haystack, and you're just trying to figure out how to wield the little influence you have to make your ideas heard. It's just, it's big company stuff, right? Like, if you talk to people at Google now, or Amazon, or Twitter, or probably a lot of these companies, like, there's always, entrepreneurs that are like lurking in the cubes that have big ideas, and they might just never get them built at that company, and they have to go leave and make their own thing, right? And that happens over and over and over again. Sometimes I'm sure there's lots of people that just never leave those companies. Like, oh, well, like, my manager didn't like my idea. I guess I'll just sit here and continue to crank out my TPS reports. But then there's other people that are like, no, I feel so strongly about this. I can't sleep at night until this thing exists. I have to go and make that thing. And they'll leave their job, and they'll leave their health insurance, and they'll get in an argument with their partner or their parents over it, and some people just have to get that stuff made.
So what came next?
There's a weird, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like, there's a weird intersection that I now appreciate from going to art school. And I don't want to ever like paint myself as an artist, because I'm not, but like the itch to create, right? If you have an itch to create, whether like, I just have to put these words on paper, I just have to record this song, I just have to make this painting, like, making software is not different than that. It's like, I have to make this thing. I have to see what happens when people use it. I have to see what happens when you use software to bring people together in this way. And some people just have that itch. And like, if you make 10 different products the same way that you'd make like 10 different paintings, like, sometimes good stuff comes out of that.
Sorry. So what came after that? What was the thing that you worked on? What were you thinking?
At Foursquare, you mean?
After Dodgeball had shut down, after you had to move on, what did you guys decide to build? What did you decide to do?
Oh, we didn't do anything. Like Alex and I got in the elevator that last day, and we kind of went our separate ways, right? Like he got a job at a design company, and I took a job with my buddy was starting a company that was doing like games that overlapped with the real world, and it was a group of people I had worked with before Dodgeball before Google bought it, and so I went and worked with those guys for like 9 months. And then I just kind of got burnt out working at another company, and I think I took like a month off. Maybe I took 2 months off, and just kind of I visited my college roommate lived in Sweden, and so I went over there and kind of just bummed around with him for like a month and just kind of hung out. And it wasn't until a couple months later that we really got the itch to make something else again, which you're always thinking like, oh yeah, what am I going to build? What am I going to build? And then we had that sense of urgency when Google said, well, we're going to turn this thing off on March 1st. And I was like, well, then we have to get to work. Like now we have a deadline. Like this thing has to be up and running by this date. And that, a deadline is a really fantastic motivator.
Yeah. So I think it was like a matter of like a year or two. I mean, you had already like millions of users on Foursquare when you started. How did that early on sort of traction start happening? Like, I mean, you build this product, was it just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people using it and it just sort of went that way, or was there more to it?
Yeah. I mean, I had never worked on a project like that before. Like Dodgeball was tens of thousands of users, 50, 60,000 users at the most. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of people. Foursquare at the height was growing 1 million users a month, right? When we had a moment, I call it, we raised our first round. We raised $1 million in September of 2009. And I remember sitting down with Fred Wilson from Union Square Ventures, like, so when are you going to hit 1 million users? And I'm like, dude, I don't think we're ever going to hit 1 million users. This is like a tool for nerds in cities. And, I remember the investors. I mean, when you meet these investors, like they invest in Twitter, Zynga, Tumblr, like they've seen this story 100 times. Like, entrepreneur comes in, has something interesting, doesn't think it's going to grow. They recognize the pattern, and it grows. And then 6 months later, we're growing by 1 million users a month. Like, what are we going to do? We never expected this. And of course, like we told you this is going to happen. So what did we do? I don't know. Right? We made something that people liked. Right? And we made it. So that's like an oversimplification. A crazy oversimplification, but we made a product that was fun. And when a lot of products weren't fun, we made something that was playful. We made something that had an opinion, right? Like going to an indie coffee shop is better than going to a Starbucks. Going to new places is better than going to the same old places. Trying new neighborhoods is better than doing the same old thing. Staying out late on a school night, having drinks at 1 a.m. on a Wednesday is cool, right? That was like the software had opinion. It would judge you. Are you cool or are you not cool? And, based on what we thought was cool, based on the rules that we hard coded in. And so that it's just not something that software did at the time. And we kind of took a stab at doing that. And, we were trying to, at the same time, you would get little nuggets of information about the city, right? What's interesting? What's cool? What's better than the place that you're at right now? Where is there a better party to go to? Right. That was the problem that we solved for people, and we solved it in a way that they hadn't used before. I think Foursquare started in like 5 cities, and we went up to like 20 or 50 or maybe 100 cities before our first engineer, this guy named Harry, like spent his Christmas break, his holiday break, recoding the system so like it would work anywhere in the world. I'm like, I don't know, man, this seems like it's a disaster. And then instantly it's just like, bam, like Foursquare works everywhere in the world, and everywhere in the world people want to use it. And we were just like, okay, here we go. Like, just hold on and try to keep the servers up and running. And that was us for like four months. 4 months. It was us for like 6 months, a year, just every day waking up, putting out fires, just trying to keep the thing going. It was wild.
But when you started this thing, I mean, you had no idea that people would be interested. I mean, you just thought, oh, this is just another thing. Let's see if it works out. You had no clue that it would grow to be what it became.
Absolutely none. I was like, listen, maybe we'll pick up some of the Dodgeball users and we'll have 10,000, 20,000 people using this thing. And those are the expectations. I mean, I remember the first time I met Mark Andreessen. This was after Foursquare was big, after Foursquare was like a million users. And Mark Andreessen, like I had his picture hanging on the wall of the dorm room. And the guy that invented the Netscape the browser, the Navigator, Mosaic. Back when I was my freshman year of college, right? And so he's like, "How big is the company going to be?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, we're going to be 12 people someday." He's like, 12 people? What are you, an idiot? Like, you're going to have 12 people working in customer support in 30 days. And I'm like, no, we don't want to make a big company. He's like, "You don't have a choice anymore. Like, this thing is growing, and you either get on board or the ship blows up. What do you want to do?" And that was we just didn't have access to those people that had gone through that experience. And so, when you get on one of these rides, you just get access to people you didn't have access to before,
right?
And they have lived experiences and stories and advice that you didn't have access to before.
Just to dive in a little deeper, because there's a lot of people now and always that start companies because, like you had mentioned, they have a problem that they want to fix, or there's a need that they want solved, etc. And they put thought and planning and research into something, and they hope that it becomes a company that has millions and tens of millions of users, right? Why? I mean, I don't want to say that you did this just to like kind of fill in time, but like if you didn't have that goal early on, why'd you even pursue it? I mean, like, what was your mind state that 10, 20,000 users is going to make me a decent living and I'll move on to the next project, get acquired? Or like, what was the goal when you started working on it and while you were working on it early on?
My hobby, right? Like, I don't know what other people do for hobbies, right? Like, I want to be the guy that sits down and plays the new Zelda game for 20 hours straight and beats it. I can't do that. Like, my hobby is making stuff and making stuff for people to use and enjoy, right? And Foursquare was started as a hobby. It's like, I want to make something for my friends. Like imagine that you just want to throw an awesome cookout. Like, I want to throw the best cookout and have all my friends come over. Everyone's gonna have an awesome Saturday and it's gonna be over with. Like that's the way that we looked at it. Like, we're gonna make a piece of software that's just gonna be an awesome endless party that you use on your phone all the time. That's what it was. Like my other side projects, right? Like, I started a soccer team in the Hudson Valley. Like, there's no, a semi-pro team. There's no money in that. It's just a fun project. It's a ton of work. Like, I spend my kids go to sleep and I fold T-shirts for the team so I can sell them out of the merch truck. Like, it's just a fun project, right? We have like another project in the city that makes pickup soccer games out of thin air and people just show up and play in them. And it's, right. I don't know what it's going to turn into, but it's like, it's super fun. People like it. Like, I like to make the thing that makes the good times for people. So everyone's always asking me, what are you going to do after Foursquare? I'm like, I don't have any idea. I don't have an idea for some like crazy, brilliant enterprise software platform that's going to revolutionize the internet. I have like 20 ideas for things that I think are kind of like fun, things that I want to play with, and things that I want to show like my 5 buddies and be like, what do you think? Is this cool or is this stupid? And I'm just going to run the same playbook. And I have no idea if any of this stuff is interesting, if any of it's any good. I just want to do that.
That's incredible. That's incredible. But one sort of piece I want to sort of touch on is, obviously we hear it all the time, like, pursue your passion, pursue what you love to do. And hopefully, obviously, something comes out of that where you can make enough money to like actually, live a decent life while continuing to do what you love. But did you ever have any worries, like when you had that mindset of, I just want to create stuff and I don't care not that you didn't care, but I don't know what's going to happen if it even becomes big enough. I just want to keep building things. Like, did you have any worries or thoughts about, what if I should actually be doing something else that I could be making, a decent amount of money to live in New York or live here or there?
All the time. Right. And I have that anxiety, like, even today, right? If I try to think about like, what is my post Foursquare life, right? Like, do I go get a job? Like, get a real job as like a executive at some other company, or do I just go make some scrappy thing with like a couple random people again? It's like I got a wife and I got kids and bills and stuff, and like that's the responsible thing to do. But I just don't have the ability to do that. Now, listen, my situation now is different. I've made a bunch of money off of Foursquare, right? I'm in a totally fine financial place. If you go back to the day when I got laid off from Vindigo, right, that Palm Pilot company, I mean, I remember walking down the street in New York City with talking to my mom on the phone and being like, "Ma, I lost this job. I can get on unemployment. I think I'm going to get evicted from my apartment. Like, I have no idea. This is before 9/11. I have no idea what to do." And my mom, I mean, I remember this clear as day. Like, her advice is like, go, find the thing that you love to do, and and just keep doing that, and everything will work itself out. And when you're like broke and you just lost your job, you're like, "Mom, that advice sucks." Like, it's just not good, but because it doesn't help you in that instant. But when you set that as your North Star and you're like, well, I'll just figure out something I can do to make some money in the time being, but I want to come back to that thing that I love doing. And that's, that has always been the North Star for me. Do what you love and the rest will come. Like that's her advice. And I've just kept coming back to that North Star. I mean, I've had a whole bunch of other crappy jobs in between, like making websites I don't care about, working consulting jobs for stuff I don't care about. I was a snowboard instructor just to get through the season, teaching like 4-year-olds how to snowboard, right? It wasn't a crazy, like, academic pursuit. It was just a way to make money through the winter. And when before Dodgeball got picked up by Google, right? Me and Alex were applying for jobs. He was applying for a job at Razorfish. I was applying for a job at MTV. And then, I think we started this conversation where the same point. Like, I had this epiphany with Alex, and I was like, maybe we're not supposed to go get jobs. Maybe this is our job. Maybe Dodgeball is our job. And it just was like, yeah, but how does that even work? And then what we said is like, well, here's what we'll do. Let's just pick up crappy freelance work through the summer. Let's give ourselves the summer to work on this thing. Don't get your full-time job. I won't get a full-time job. We'll work on this thing on the side. And that's how I just made websites and did freelance stuff and worked out this as a side hustle. And then by the end of the summer, like, the thing was Dodgeball was going. Like that's like, I mean, I got lucky. Like, this is just luck, right? Like, we had made something that was clever. We had worked on it enough. And then I was lucky enough to be able to, like, I don't know, scrap along with just freelance jobs. And then we got lucky with the acquisition. So, like, it's not like I'm some crazy mastermind. Like, there's a lot of luck that gets built into it too. But the core thing is like, if you got stuff you want to make, just don't ever cut that out of your master plan. Like, you should always have that as your North Star and find a way to get back to doing it.
I'm curious, from your perspective, do you think Foursquare was too early, too late, or just right on time, and why?
It's a great question. It depends what type of, what part of Foursquare you're talking about. Like, Foursquare is 12 years old, almost 13 years old, and has lived 1,000 lives, right?
I'm talking about the earlier Foursquare, like when you guys first launched it.
Well, I mean, it was just right in the from the perspective that it went through the age of growing by 1 million users a month. Like, we lived that experience. But we got to like 50 million users and we just couldn't figure out how to monetize it. Right. Like, we weren't big enough to sell big ads like a Twitter or a Snapchat or a Facebook or an Instagram were. Right. And we didn't have enough revenue we weren't going to build a local sales force because we knew that Yelp was just digging a hole for themselves with that model. And it was tough, right? Like, it turns out that data, insights, location intelligence, data analytics, geospatial stuff, that's a good business for Foursquare. That wasn't really clear until like, 2013, 2016, right? 2015. And Foursquare really needed that answer in 2012. So it's like there's like a 3-year delta between that. And,
Mhm.
really hard years for the company, but like, hey, whatever, we're still around, we're still doing our thing, and it's a good business, good profitable business, $100 million a year, more than that.
Yeah. And I know Foursquare ended up eventually merging with Factual. I think it was last year, but or throughout that time, I mean, I saw that like you had patented several technologies and you had created this like company out of this product that was clearly working, but you were just not figuring out how to monetize it. Like, did you ever get approached by any companies to get it acquired for them to implement it into their own like platforms? Did that ever happen throughout those 12
Oh yeah,
years
yeah, we've
or
had we've
11 years?
had tons of those conversations. Some of them from companies we didn't want to work at. Sometimes the price wasn't right. And then sometimes you're just like, listen, we're in the middle of doing something amazing, and I just don't want to let it go. Right? Facebook tried to buy us really early on in 2010, and I had spent a lot of time with Mark Zuckerberg at the time, and I ultimately was like, listen, I made a company before and I sold it to Google, and I made some money off it, and it wasn't it wasn't ultimately satisfying for me. Like what gets me excited is building stuff for people. And I think we have a better shot of doing the building stuff for people if we stay independent. And he's like, okay, I understand that. I respect that. And we kind of went our separate ways. But that was probably the one that we gave the most thought to.
And did you feel like you made the right choice? I guess looking back.
Yeah, I mean, like I think we would have we made a ton of money had we had sold to Facebook way back then, right? But at the same time, we wouldn't have built all the stuff that we built. And I think it comes down to like what's important to you, right? I think I was very fortunate to live through the Google experience and make some money of selling Dodgeball to Google, enough money to be like, this is not the thing that makes me happy, right? The thing that makes me happy is building teams and working with people and inventing stuff. That's what I like to do. And so when I had to make that decision later on, when the stakes were significantly higher, I optimized for like, I'm going to build something awesome. I'm going to build this thing build a tech company in New York when that wasn't really a thing that people were doing. And, in hindsight, I look at all the stuff that we've accomplished in terms of, all these people in the history of New York tech that have worked at Foursquare before. It's kind of this iconic company. We've made lots of interesting technology, even the consumer stuff. If it didn't succeed in the consumer app, like a lot of the stuff that we invented is in Google Maps, is in Apple Maps, has been copied by other companies, right? Like we have played a significant role in this generation of the internet, and that's a meaningful thing for me. So
And
I don't have any regrets about that.
And for people out there that are like you, are just builders, tinkers, they just want to continue to build, right? I know you've said sort of obviously like at a certain point, I think it was like 2016, where you decided to step down as CEO after the company had, was millions of users, tens of millions of users, hundreds of employees. You were sort of running this big organization, and obviously you didn't feel comfortable being in that role, and you wanted to go back to, I guess, building and working on things. What else was kind of going through your mind, like, and I guess like what should people know that maybe are early on right now, maybe have a small team or still kind of hands-on building, that they should know about a company that's at that level, and if they're the right person to lead it.
Yeah, I'll tell you that I think the best piece of advice I've probably gotten in the whole journey was from Mark Zuckerberg. And having lunch, it was probably 10 years ago, right? And I was asking him, like, how is your job structured, and how do you do this job as CEO? Like, I was struggling to keep up with it. And he's like, well, you have to choose what type of CEO you want to be, right? Like, you can't just be a CEO. You're either the product CEO or the sales CEO or the visionary CEO or the engineering CEO or the deal maker CEO, right? You got to choose which one you want to be, and then you hire executives to do all the other stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm the product CEO. And so I run the product team, and I spend my days working on product, and I outsource the rest of the, what's normally classified as like CEO job as to other people on my team, like CFO and, the head of BD and the head of sales. And it was just a really fantastic piece of advice because it was totally not non-obvious to me at the time. And, I think the way that translates into, how I end up stepping out of the CEO role is like, Foursquare didn't need a product CEO anymore. Foursquare needed like a deal maker, a business visionary type of CEO, someone that could be like, all right, I see the assets that we have, and I can create an enterprise business out of that. And I told the board this. I'm like, I mean, I can go and read every enterprise business book like that. That's not who I am. Like, I'm the product tinkerer CEO. Like, I'm still a value to the company. I'm still going to stay here. I'm going to be number one cheerleader. I'll run the R&D lab. But you need someone that like gets up every morning and they're like, what I love? I love enterprise data. That's the person that needs to be the CEO. And that's the person we found to be the CEO at that time. And that was the right move. The board was like founder-led. Founder-led companies. Founder CEOs are the best CEOs. And I'm like, I get it, right? And I totally subscribe to that. But there are moments in a company's life where like, listen, you just need someone else to come in and take the ship in a different direction. And that, that's what Foursquare needed at that time. It was a really hard decision, but like the right decision.
Yeah, Dennis, and I agree with you there. I think that, there are the right leaders for the right time, not just from a business standpoint, from a, state, city, government, nonprofit, hospital, whoever's running those, right? There's always the right leader for the right time. At times a school may need a fundraising person that's going to go out there and be that face. Sometimes they need the person that's going to develop new programming. Sometimes they need the person that's going to be great at bringing talent to the school, marketing, right? So there's the right leader for the right time. I'm curious, from a founder's perspective like yourself, how was it like, or how was it like for you dealing with a board who didn't start this company, right? Like, they are advisors, they are, intellectuals, I'm sure, and leaders in their own right, but they didn't start this company. They didn't have that original vision that you had. What is it like dealing with a board like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think most boards are like that. Most boards are,
Yeah,
you get a CEO, you get a bunch of people that didn't, have never worked at the company, have never even started a company, and certainly didn't start that company. Even though my title, like on my business card, used to say founder and CEO, like there's really another title, which is chairman of the board. And as the chairman of the board, your job is to manage the board, right? And so you control the cadence and the topics of the board meeting, and like, what you want the board to help on and what you want the board to stay out of, and like what do you want to discuss, what do you not want to discuss. And board management is a real part of the CEO job. Like, even though I'm not CEO of the company, I'm still chairman of the board. And that's a role. Like, I in all honesty, I don't play that role as well as I should, not for a later stage company, right? It's actually me and Gil, who's a co-founder of Factual. We're both like co-chairs of the board. So the two of us working together, I think, are doing an okay job at that. But like, Foursquare is a big, big company, big revenue. Lots of people like could eventually IPO someday. Like, who knows, right? And so that's like a interesting place to sit on the board at. And thankfully, we have lots of talented board members that have seen other companies at this stage. Like, they've seen companies going through this transition process where they go from unprofitable to profitable to, it's like, okay, profitable, now what? What's the next thing that we're going to do? And that's a whole different stage. And like, I have some things to add to it, but I kind of sit back and kind of watch it unfold.
Just to sort of wrap this up, I know you mentioned like you have no idea what the next step would be for you if you were to move on and do something different, right? But I'm curious, if you were just kind of getting started today, knowing what you know now, what is something that you're like really excited about seeing? Perhaps it's some sort of emerging technology, or something from like an innovation standpoint. Like, what are you really looking forward to, and then seeing in the next few years, I guess?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, maybe this is just like me being an old disgruntled guy, but like there's not a ton of stuff that really gets me super excited, right? Like I saw not my cousin, um my godson this weekend, right? And he's like what, 11 years old or something, and he spends a lot of time in Oculus, right? And he's telling me about it, and I'm like, I know that doesn't seem healthy, but it probably doesn't seem healthy in the same way that like I spent a lot of time playing Nintendo, right? And I'm just trying to like wrap my head around that stuff. And it's the same thing with augmented reality, right? Like I kind of love the vision of it, but like I kind of don't want to be the guy that has the glasses on that sees the magical dragons popping out. You know, like I'm fine with the real world, right? I'm like, am I just old? Am I just like really out of touch? Like, and I was talking to my wife about this. Like, what are our kids going to be like? Like, are our kids going to be like, Dad, I can't believe that you can't see the magical giraffes walking around the living room. You're so lame that you don't want to see the magical giraffes. And I just like I can't quite see. I don't know. I'm just not there yet. So what are the things I like? I like software that brings people together, right? Post pandemic, like I have an itch to like use the type of tools that we built in the past. Like, where are my friends? I don't want to make plans. I want to serendipitously run into people. I want to know where people are. Like, there's tons of tools to do that now, which is great. I was talking about we working on that soccer thing that spins up pickup soccer games, right? Playing those games twice a week makes it super easy. I don't have to do anything. I just show up, play. Like that's great. I love that. So I don't really know. Like there's lots of technologies I'm super interested in, like self-driving cars, right? But I'm not gonna do a self-driving car thing. I would never drive a car that I worked on. No way. Like some piece of software that I wrote drive me and my kids around. No way. Absolutely not. So I really don't know. But I am, the stuff that made Dodgeball and Foursquare interesting, which is like make software that's fun, make software that's like unexpectedly playful, unexpectedly flirty, unexpectedly serendipitous, right? That stuff I like, and I think I will always come back to that, like software that just like the classic surprise and delight thing, but like actually make some surprise and delight, not like likes and comments and all this shit. Like actually surprise me, like delight me, do the thing, So I don't know what it is, but we'll figure it out.
It sounds like you like products that are real and in real life and being in reality, right? Like, based on what I heard just now on your thoughts on VR and AR and whatnot, those are things that are beyond our real world, right? Which are fantastic. I mean, I think it's great for imagination. It's great for gaming, things of that nature. But when it comes down to it, and I think it's something that, again, it's more so a value people might disagree with, and I agree with you, by the way, on those things that you said. But I like being in the moment. I like being an authentic person. Just this is who I am. This is what you're gonna get. I like the real world. I like people in the real world. I like connecting in the real world. Everything else is just kind of a bonus. But to your point about your kids and the dragons and giraffes flying around in the living room, I do think that this next generation. I think, what is it, Z right now? I think after them it's called Alpha. If I'm not, I was just looking this up yesterday. Generation Alpha, and I think they're already born now, part of them. If that's what they like, if AR, VR, NFTs, crypto are the technologies that they adapt, naturally, just based on numbers, those are going to become the quote unquote norm. And it's not that you and I and others are getting old and have a different way of thinking. It's just, it is what it is. I mean, we use the internet, we use Foursquare, we use social media. Everybody that's behind us is going to use some other thing, and that's just going to be the norm. And I think that that's a healthy thing. I think it just is. I think you could, yeah.
Well, no, it's not. It is what it is. It's like we're getting old, and we cannot empathize with those
that also is what it is. I mean, we're just getting old.
Yeah. I mean, like the Nintendo thing. Like I remember my parents as being like, you can't be sitting inside playing Zelda all day, and it's like, well, and the version of that from today is like, I'm just sitting on my couch reading Twitter all day. And it's my godson, I'm just sitting on the couch on Oculus all day. With my kids, it might be like I have my Magic Leap glasses on all day. it's the same shit, just different,
Yep,
more advanced technology. And it will,
totally.
yeah, that generation will find ways to live with that technology. Even if we look at it and we're like, this is incredibly obtrusive, like kids will just grow up with it. Like, can
Right.
you remember when people would first start texting at dinner, and you're like, what are you doing? We're sitting here at dinner. And and
Oh
and,
yeah.
and now, like, you can go to dinner and everyone just sits there and doesn't do anything. Like, it was obtrusive. Now it's just normal, just the way
It's
it
almost like,
is.
why aren't you texting at dinner now? It's like, what do you? What kind of
Yeah, yeah.
weirdo are you?
Remember the people that were like, "Oh, I'll never get a cell phone. I don't want to be reached. I just don't want to be reached." And like that was like it's like, hey, I kind of empathize with that. And now you're like, what are you, bananas? Absolutely not. Of course you want to be reached. It's just like you're the tolerance for what people will do. And I have no doubt about it that, like, by the time my kids are, probably like in middle school, right? They got glasses on where they see stuff that doesn't exist, and they're able to, telepathically, send text messages through Facebook Messenger just by, moving their fingers, right? You've seen those demos of those things, and
Yeah.
that's changes everything in a
You
way
know,
that, like,
but I will say, Dennis, but for that Harry Potter map, you might have not created Foursquare, right? I mean, that imagination and that pretend or fake map thing in that movie inspired you, or in some way, activated your
yeah,
imagination,
yeah,
your thoughts, and your ideas, and you created something like that in real life, right? Hopefully, people don't create real life dragons, but that might be the case. Like, I think that these technologies will help children and even adults think a
oh yeah,
different way, which I think is
I
super, super awesome,
yeah,
right? It forces you to think outside of what you think. Like, even NFTs, for example, I think is just so stupid, if you ask me, right, on the surface. But when you think about it and you think about why people like it and why people are invested in it, I
yeah,
start understanding it. It starts, things start making sense. And I think
yeah,
over time, they either normalize, or things are built around them that help it normalize. I mean, at first it was probably weird that people carried around cell phones. Now businesses are done, and run on this thing, right? Like,
yeah,
your
yeah,
whole world is run on this thing. So, you know, I just see it as a way that it's like, it gets you thinking, which I think is a great thing. And hopefully people are inspired by these new and emerging technologies, and they take your example of building Foursquare, and and how that's lived so long, like the longevity, right? I think that's a huge thing that people don't talk about, specifically in tech or business in general, is like how long this business of yours has survived. I mean, like, usually it's like, 5-6 years, you get, acquired and on to the next. Like, I do think that there's a lot of value in the longevity of a business, and being able to be adaptable and change, and move with the current times. And clearly, you've been able to do an excellent job at that. So, major props to you on that.
oh, thanks. Yeah, it's like, just one more thing on that topic. Like, when we were doing dodgeball as grad students, 25-year-old grad students, right? Like, using the mobile phone for data was like a radical new idea, and people are like, people won't do that. People aren't going to text. Like, dodgeball was like, no, you don't even send a text message to a person. You send a text message to a robot, and then the robot sends it back out to people, and people are like, what the hell are you talking about, right? Um, and we were cutting edge, because mobile phones were the tools that, like, I don't say we grew up with, but like we were right on the edge of that, right? We had the tools, we could buy the tools, and we knew how to build for the tools. And that's what, like, that, the future is going to belong to the kids that are like, listen, I grew up in VR. I grew up playing Pokemon Go. I grew up with AR Pokemon. I like that, and that's super exciting. I grew up with NBA Top Shots. I grew up, immersed in, open world. Every video game was open world, right? And so, like, what that generation of people will invent next is just, it's going to be crazy and awesome. And
Yeah.
I think it's almost a given that I may never even understand it. It's just like,
Yeah.
I
It's
didn't go
it's
through the same
exciting. I
experience
mean,
of living in
yeah.
Oculus. Yeah, yeah, which it's fun. It's fun.
Just look at where we were like 10, 15, 20 years ago and where we are now. It's like so much can change in such a short amount of time in the grand scheme of things. But
Yeah.
anyways, Dennis, this has been super, super fun. We can't thank you enough for, you taking the time to hang out with us and sharing your story and wisdom. And, we're super excited to see what you do next, whatever it might be. And yeah, this has been great.
Yeah, super fun. And, thanks for the trip down memory lane. It's been a long time since I want to unearth a lot of these memories, so I appreciate it.